You always knew you were different. It was not a point of pride. It was a simple, unsettling fact, like having an eye color no one else had ever seen, or hearing a note no instrument could produce. For you, it was the doors. They shimmered at the edge of your vision. They appeared in places they had no right to be. A flicker of impossible geometry in the brick wall of a coffee shop, a sliver of pure starlight in the trunk of an old oak tree, a doorway of silent static behind the bathroom mirror. You tried to explain it once, when you were 7. You told your mother there was a door in the pantry. It smelled like rain and old metal. She checked you for a fever. She gave you a cookie and told you about imaginary friends. You learned to stop talking about the doors. They were your constant, secret companions. You never tried to open one. You were afraid of what might be on the other side. You were more afraid of what would happen if you opened it, and found nothing at all. What would that say about you? So you walked through your life. You pretended not to see the invitations to somewhere else. You became an expert at looking away. It was a quiet, lonely existence, an anomaly hiding in plain sight, until the echo came. It found you during a quiet Tuesday morning. You were just stirring sugar into your tea. The world tilted sideways. Not your body, the world itself. The spoon in your hand felt 1,000 miles away. The scent of rain and old metal flooded your senses. It was the smell of a door, but there was no door in sight. A voice entered your mind. It was not a sound. It was a pressure, a memory of a scream that had been traveling for 1,000,000 years. It was fractured, broken into pieces by a journey across impossible spaces. But the words were there, buried in the static, a warning, a plea from a place you did not know. It spoke of a great silence, a stillness that was not peace. It was a hunger, an ending that moved. The voice said it consumed worlds. It erased them from existence. It was coming. It was always coming. The pressure vanished. The world snapped back into place. Your tea was cold. The spoon was on the floor. You were trembling. For the first time, you looked at the shimmering door in your wall, and you were not just afraid. You felt a terrifying sense of recognition. The echo was not a warning for them. It was a warning for you. The message changed everything. The doors were no longer a private quirk. They were a symptom of a universal sickness. You started to watch the sky. You told yourself it was foolish. A single psychic echo was not proof. It was probably just a weird cosmic burp. Nothing to worry about. For 3 weeks, the world agreed with you. The sun rose and set. The news talked about politics and sports. The stars were bright and familiar. Then it happened. A single star, Proxima Centauri, vanished. One night it was there, a faint red spark in the heavens. The next, it was gone. Star science experts were baffled. They offered theories: a dust cloud, a gravitational anomaly, a new type of black hole. They spoke with great confidence. They assured the public it was a natural event, rare but understandable. You knew they were wrong. Then a week later, Sirius disappeared. The brightest star in the sky, just gone. The world fell into a quiet panic. Telescopes on Earth and in orbit stared at the empty space. They saw nothing. No explosion, no nebula, just a perfect, starless black, as if it had never been there at all. This was the great silence. This was the stillness that was not peace. It did not destroy. It erased. People stopped sleeping at night. They watched the sky with a new kind of fear. Which star would be next? Would our own sun just go out? There was no defense against an enemy you could not see, an enemy that did nothing but make things cease. The vanishing of the stars broke the world's composure. Fear became a constant hum beneath the noise of civilization. The experts fell silent. Their theories sounded hollow now. 2 stars, gone, erased without a trace. It was not a star-borne event. It was an attack. And somehow, they found you. You never learned how. Maybe the echo you heard left a psychic ripple. Maybe your unique brain lit up on some secret scan. One day, men in dark suits were at your door. They did not look like spies or soldiers. They looked like tired professors. Their eyes held a desperate, terrifying hope. They took you to a place deep underground, a facility that did not officially exist. They showed you images from their most powerful telescopes. They showed you data streams that made no sense. They explained that everything they knew about the universe was wrong. They knew they were helpless. Then they showed you an image of yourself, a brain scan taken from orbit. It showed a network of neural pathways that were impossible. They pulsed with an energy that did not match any known biological model. They told you your brain operated on more than 4 dimensions, which, you had to admit, explained a lot about your trouble with taxes. They did not call you a freak. They did not want to study you. They wanted to ask for your help. The leader of the group, a woman with kind eyes and gray hair, spoke to you. She said, "We see the monster, but you see the cracks in its armor. You see the paths it cannot travel." She was talking about your doors. Humanity's greatest minds had failed. Their last, desperate gamble was you. You were their only hope. You had to walk the hidden paths. You had to find a way to fight the silence. They gave you a simple mission. Find a weapon. Find a shield. Find a reason. Find anything that could stop the encroaching void. They had no map. They had no idea where your doors led. All they could offer was technology to keep you alive, a suit to protect you, a beacon to bring you home. If home was still there when you returned. You stood before the first door you would choose to open. It shimmered in the center of the vast chamber they had built for you. A swirling portal of liquid silver. It smelled of dust and forgotten paper. You took a deep breath. You thought about the erased stars. You thought about the 7 billion people hoping you were not just a hallucinating weirdo. No pressure, right? You gave the lead scientist a weak thumbs up. She tried to smile back. It did not quite work. You put your hand on the shimmering surface. It was cool to the touch. You stepped through, and the universe you knew was gone. The other side was not a different world. It was the absence of one. You stood on a platform of gray, glassy material. It stretched in every direction under a sky without stars. The air was thin and cold. It carried the scent of ozone and deep time. There was no sun. The only light came from the floor itself, a dim, sorrowful glow. You had arrived in a dead reality, a museum of a fallen civilization. All around you were towers, not of metal or stone. They were towers of pure information, crystalline spires that pulsed with faint light. You reached out to touch one. Your gloved fingers sank into it as if it were water. Instantly, your mind filled with images, not your own. They were the memories of a species long gone. You saw their world, a paradise of shimmering cities and gentle people. They were artists and thinkers. Their star science was far beyond humanity's. They had mastered their solar system. They were preparing to reach for others. Then they saw it. The same thing your people saw. Stars in their sky began to vanish. The silence came for them. You felt their confusion. their dawning horror. They were a people of peace. They had no weapons. Their first instinct was not to fight, but to understand. They turned their incredible minds to the problem. This place, this entire plane of existence, was their answer. A library of their failure. A final message in a bottle. They had converted their entire world into a single, massive data storage device. A record of everything they were. Everything they learned about the enemy that erased them. They could not save themselves. So they built a monument to warn whoever came next. You walked through the silent library. You let the crystal towers feed you their stories. You learned that the silence, they called it the null, was not a creature. It was not an empire. It was a fundamental principle of reality. A flaw in the design of existence. The tendency for all things to seek absolute zero. Absolute stillness. They had tried to fight it. You saw their desperate projects. They built ships that could weave space-time. They tried to create new suns from nothing. They attempted to anchor their reality to others, to build a wall of universes. But everything they built, the null, simply unmade. It did not break their creations. It convinced them to not exist. Their final, heartbreaking conclusion was recorded in the tallest spire. You placed your hand upon it. The voice of their last scientist filled your mind. It was calm, resigned. We thought the opposite of life was death, it said. We were wrong. The opposite of life is stillness. It does not hate us. It does not see us. We are just noise. And it wants quiet. You felt their despair, the crushing weight of their failure. They had been smarter than humanity, stronger in many ways, and they had lost completely. You took your hand away from the spire. The voice faded. You were alone again in the gray, silent expanse. This was not the answer you were sent to find. This was a blueprint for hopelessness. Your beacon blinked on your wrist, a signal from home. They were asking for a report. What could you tell them? That the enemy is the concept of nothingness itself? That the smartest people in this dead reality decided the only sane response was to lie down and be erased? You closed your eyes. The warning was clear. But you were human. Lying down was not in your nature. You had to leave this place. This graveyard of a reality was a tomb, a monument to giving up. As you prepared to open a new door, a way out, you felt a shift in the non-air, a presence. You were not alone anymore. Something was watching you from the spaces between the towers of light. They did not appear all at once. They coalesced from the gray twilight, tall, thin figures made of shifting shadows and captured starlight. They had no faces, no discernible features. Yet you felt their gaze, a dozen sets of ancient, tired eyes. They were not from the library. They were from somewhere else entirely. The little walker, a voice said. It was not a voice like the libraries. It was a chorus of whispers that spoke directly inside your skull. It was smooth, melodic, and utterly devoid of warmth. You have read the Book of the Fallen. You have learned the lesson. You stood your ground. Your heart hammered against your ribs. These were not ghosts of the library's creators. They were something older, something that belonged to the emptiness. Who are you? You asked. Your voice sounded small in the immense silence. We are the Watchers, the chorus replied. We exist in the seams, the gutters between the pages of reality. We have seen the story play out 1 billion times. We have seen 1 billion species make the same choice you are about to make. Another Watcher drifted closer. Its form was like smoke, a hole in the shape of a person. They all choose to fight, it whispered. Its voice was like grinding stone. They raise their little swords of physics and hope. They build their fortresses of logic and love. They sing their songs of defiance into the dark. You felt a surge of defiance yourself. What's wrong with that? It's better than doing nothing. Even to your own ears, you sounded like a child arguing with a storm. It was a very human thing to say. Probably a very stupid one, too. The first watchers seemed to sigh. A ripple of static passed through its form. To do nothing is to accept the inevitable. To fight is to accelerate it. The null is stillness. The act of fighting, of creating energy, of making noise, draws its attention. It is like a child splashing in a calm lake to spite the water. The ripples you make only help the water settle faster. The implication was a punch to the gut. Every effort to fight back, every desperate struggle, only made the silence come quicker. The ghost civilization in the library had learned this. Their last act was not to fight, but to become a quiet record. A warning these watchers were now repeating. To fight is to lose, the chorus of voices said, speaking as one. That is the great, terrible joke of the multiverse. The only winning move is not to play. Walk away, little one. Find a quiet corner of existence and wait for the end. It is the only mercy you will find. The watchers began to fade. Their forms dissolved back into the gray twilight. Their parting words echoed in your mind. A cold and logical poison, a perfect argument for surrender. They were wrong. They had to be wrong. Humanity did not get this far by giving up when the odds were bad. Bad odds were practically a Tuesday for your species. You looked at the blinking beacon on your wrist. Home was waiting for hope. You could not bring them this. You would not. You thought of the library, all that knowledge, all that failure. They had tried to build things, to create anchors in reality. What if they were thinking too big? What if you did not need to anchor a world? What if you only needed to anchor a single point of light? A spark, a tiny, defiant noise in the face of the great silence. An idea formed in your mind. A reckless, desperate, and probably stupid idea. It felt more human than anything you had ever thought. You closed your eyes. You ignored the lingering whispers of the watchers. You reached out with your mind. Not for a place, but for a thing. You remembered the feeling of sunlight on your face. The warmth of a star 93 million miles away. You focused on that memory, on the physics of it. A self-sustaining nuclear reaction, a fountain of pure energy. You found a door, not to a world, but into the heart of a star, a young, vibrant blue giant in a reality teeming with life. Your senses screamed. Your suit flashed warnings of impossible heat and radiation. But you were not there in body. You were there in mind, a thief in the house of creation. You reached through the door with your will. You did not try to pull the whole star. You did not even try to pull a planet's worth of plasma. You wanted a handful, a single contained piece of a sun, a flicker of defiance. You wrapped your perception around a bubble of stellar fire, and you pulled. The universe around you screamed in protest. The gray library floor cracked. The air, which was not air, tore open. You felt a strain that was not physical. It was a tearing of your own soul, the cost of breaking the rules. You were not just walking between worlds. You were stealing from them. With a final, desperate heave, you brought it through. A sphere of pure, white-hot sun floated before you. It was no bigger than your fist, yet it blazed with the light of 1,000 dawns. It pushed back the gray gloom. It cast shadows behind the crystal towers for the first time in eons. The silence of this place was broken by the gentle hum of fusion. You had done it. You had forged a key of light, a small, impossible star held in the heart of a dead reality. It was a weapon, a tool, a statement. It was a noise. A very loud, very bright noise pointed directly at the quiet. You looked at the tiny sun in your hand, and for the first time, you smiled. You had a way to fight back. The little sun in your hand was more than light. It was a proof of concept. You could not stop the null with fists or ships, but you could fight stillness with creation. You could answer silence with a song. Your new star was just a single note. You needed a symphony. You dismissed the glowing orb. It vanished, its light returning to the reality you stole it from. The oppressive gray of the library world returned. But it felt different now. Less permanent. The Watchers had said to fight was to lose. You decided they lacked imagination. It was time to find some allies who had it in spades. You focused your will again. You sought a new door, not a quiet, dead place, not an empty place between the folds. You looked for noise, for chaos, for struggle, for a reality forged in fire. You found it. A dark, angry echo in the multiverse. A version of Earth where humanity's story was written in blood and gunpowder. The jump was violent. The air on the other side was thick with smoke and chemicals. You stood on a mountain of rubble that was once a city. The sky was a bruised purple. It was filled with the contrails of warring aircraft. This was a world that had never known a single day of peace. From the moment they mastered fire, this timeline's humanity had used it on each other. Their history was a relentless series of ever-escalating wars. They had fought over land, over faith, over resources. They had bled their planet dry. Now they fought over the scraps, with machines of incredible and terrifying power. Almost immediately, alarms shrieked. You were detected. Within moments, you were surrounded, not by men in suits, but by soldiers in powered armor. Their weapons glowed with contained energy. A voice crackled in your helmet. It was harsh, demanding. Identify yourself. Now you did not have time for a lengthy explanation, so you gave them the truth, the short version, anyway. I am from another Earth, you said. I am here because we have a common enemy. An enemy that will erase this world and mine. They took you to their command center. It was a bunker buried deep beneath the mountains of rubble. Their leader was a woman with a scarred face and eyes that had seen too much. Her name was General Eva Rostova. She listened to your story without expression. You told her about the null, the vanishing stars, the great silence. When you finished, she was quiet for a long time. The generals around her muttered. They thought you were a spy, or insane, a convenient fairy tale. General Rostova raised a hand for silence. She looked at you, not at your suit but at your eyes. We have seen it, she said. Her voice was quiet but carried immense weight. Our astronomers reported the same. Stars vanishing from the sky. We thought it was a new weapon from our enemies. We tore apart 2 continents looking for it. She paused. We found nothing. She understood. This battle-hardened, cynical warrior. She understood the threat was real. Not because of your story, but because it explained the one mystery her own violent world could not solve. She saw the truth. She also saw an opportunity. You speak of an enemy that erases. An enemy of stillness, she said, her eyes gleaming with a strange light. We are a species of noise. We have perfected it. Stillness is not in our vocabulary. She smiled, a chilling, predatory smile. You came to us for a weapon. We do not have one that can shoot a concept, but we can offer you something else. She led you to a vast chamber. In the center was a colossal engine. It pulsed with a dark, contained energy. It was not a power source. It was not a propulsion drive. This is the Defiance engine, Rostova explained. Our final work, our masterpiece of spite. She told you that when their world was finally dying, choked by their eternal wars, they decided on one last, united act. They would not let the silence of space be their end. They built an engine that converted the very act of struggle, the anger, the fear, the sheer, stubborn refusal to yield, into a raw, transmittable energy. It is a broadcast of our will to exist, she said, placing a hand on the engine's casing. A scream into the void that says, "We are here." It is pure, concentrated defiance. It cannot destroy the null, but it can hold it back. It can shield a world with its sheer, bloody-minded noise. A perfect joke for a species that only stopped fighting each other to fight existence itself. They offered it to you, a gift from one humanity to another. The knowledge to build your own Defiance engine. It was their greatest weapon, the only thing they had ever created that was not for killing each other. It was designed to spite the universe itself. You accepted. You had your shield. Each jump was taking a greater toll. You could feel it. The journey back from the world of war was disorienting. For a few moments, you could not remember which Earth was yours. The one with green fields and quiet hope, or the one of scarred earth and defiant screams. You were becoming unmoored. Less a person from a place, and more a transient idea. Your body ached with a fatigue that sleep could not cure. The doctors in the underground base ran their scans. They told you your biological data was drifting. Your quantum signature was no longer stable. You were shedding bits of your home reality like a snake sheds its skin. You were becoming less you, more a composite, a blend of all the places you had been. You sometimes smelled the dust of the library. You heard the phantom echo of the war machines. Your memories were no longer just your own. They were tangled with the ghost memories of the fallen species, the angry hope of the warrior humanity. The lead scientist sat with you. She looked at your charts with a worried expression. "You are becoming a ghost," she said softly. "You exist, but you are less and less tied to the specific plane. If you keep this up, you might not be able to come back. Not as you." You knew she was right. But what was the alternative? To stay here? To watch the stars go out one by one? To wait for the silence to consume the home you were slowly forgetting? The price of saving humanity was yourself. It was a price you had to be willing to pay. There was not really a choice. You had the pieces now. A key of light from a stolen sun. The design for a shield of pure defiance. But you still did not understand the enemy. You understood what it did, but not what it was. The library's creators called it a flaw, a tendency toward stillness. But a tendency is not an intelligence. It does not choose. The null felt deliberate. You needed more information. You needed to go deeper. You turned your mind inward. You searched for a door, not to a place, but to a source, a place of deep knowledge. You cast your senses into the multiverse, past the worlds of war and the libraries of the dead. You searched for a whisper of something older. You found it, a resonance, a faint signal beneath the noise of all other realities. It was a clue left behind by the first intelligence. The beings who, if such a thing was even possible, had laid the foundations of the multiverse, the architects of existence. You opened the door and stepped into a place of pure concept. The enemy was not an army. It was not a ravenous monster. You stood in a sea of pure information. You saw the code of creation, and you finally understood the null's true nature. It was not a flaw in the system. It was a feature, a cosmic failsafe. The multiverse, you learned, was designed to be a temporary state, an explosion of energy and complexity, a beautiful, chaotic experiment. But it was never meant to be permanent. The ultimate fate of all things was to return to their origin, a state of perfect, timeless unity, a state of absolute, final stillness. The null was the mechanism for this return. It was the universe's own desire to go home, to rest. It was not evil. It was not malicious. It was the end of the story, written on the first page. The civilizations it erased were not murdered. They were completed. Their stories were over. This was a terrifying revelation. How do you fight the basic nature of reality itself? How do you wage a war against the tide, returning to the sea? You were not fighting an invader. You were fighting against destiny, the very purpose for which all things were made. Your defiance was not just against an enemy. It was against the grand design. You felt a deep, profound weariness. The Watchers had been right. To fight was to lose. To struggle against the current was to waste energy before you were inevitably swept away. Maybe the only sane choice was to let go, to accept the peace of the end, to be completed. But as you stood in that ocean of knowledge, you found something else, a loophole, an anomaly in the grand design. The first ones, the architects, had been artists as much as engineers. They had built their creation not just with logic, but with love, a love for the chaotic, beautiful things they had made. They had left behind a back door, a hidden song buried in the source code of reality. It was not a weapon, it was a possibility, a seed for a new kind of existence, one that was not bound by the original plan, a universe that could write its own ending. The song was a complex symphony of intersecting realities, a harmony of different possibilities woven together. It was a way to create something new, something the null could not understand, something that was not on its list of things to complete. You had the key. You had the shield. Now you had the song. The plan was no longer to fight the end. The plan was to create a new beginning. You were no longer just the woman who walked between universes. You were becoming something more. The song of the first ones gave you a new perspective. You saw the multiverse not as a collection of separate worlds. You saw it as an orchestra, each reality a different instrument, each with its own voice, its own melody. The dead world of the library was a deep, sorrowful cello. The world of endless war was a blast of furious trumpets. Your own Earth was a hopeful, gentle flute. Alone, they were just noises, vulnerable to the encroaching silence. But together, they could make a symphony. You stopped walking. You started conducting. You reached out with your unmoored consciousness. You touched the realities you had visited. You pulled not just yourself through the doors, but the worlds themselves, not physically. You pulled their essence, their resonant frequencies. You began to weave them together. You took the quiet grief of the library. You wove it with the defiant scream of the warrior humanity. You took the brilliant light of the stolen sun. You braided it with the song of the first ones. You were creating a shield unlike any other, a shield made not of matter or energy, but of stories, a fortress of concepts. Around your Earth, a new reality began to form, a buffer zone made of echoes and possibilities. It was a place that both existed and did not. A superposition of worlds. It was a chord played by a billion different instruments at once. A symphony so complex, so full of beautiful, chaotic noise, that the stillness of the null could not find a way in. It was a wall of music against a tide of silence. And you were its conductor. You stood at the heart of your creation. The symphony of worlds played around you. You could feel the null outside, a vast and patient pressure. It was waiting. It recognized your shield as an anomaly, a complex noise that needed to be resolved. It began to press inward, not with force, but with a gentle, insistent pull. To hold the shield together, you had to go to it. You had to face the silence at its own game. You traveled to the center of its void, to the place where the stars were gone. You opened a final door and stepped into the heart of the null. There was nothing, not darkness, not emptiness, just nothing. The absence of concepts, the lack of is. And yet, there was a presence, a vast, calm intelligence. It did not speak in words. It communicated in feelings. And the feeling it offered you was peace. It showed you a vision. You were home, not the home of your birth, but the true home. You were no longer fractured, no longer unmoored. You were whole, complete. The aches of your soul were gone. The terrible weight of a billion lives was lifted. There was no more struggle, no more pain, only a profound and final rest. This was the null's great power, not erasure, but the promise of release. It offered you the one thing you craved more than anything else: an end to your journey, an end to the pain. It was not a trick. It was a genuine offer. The universe's final act of mercy. All you had to do was let go of the song, stop conducting, and rest. For a moment, you considered it. The peace was so seductive. The promise of an end to the weariness was almost overwhelming. You had done enough. You had built them a shield. Let someone else carry the burden. You deserved this rest. But then you thought of the song, the chaotic, beautiful, messy song of humanity. The sound of children laughing, the taste of hot coffee, the feeling of sunlight on skin, the arguments, the art, the stupid jokes, the pointless, wonderful defiance of it all. The null offered peace, but humanity offered life. You looked at the vast, peaceful intelligence of the null, and you made your choice. No, you projected. The concept was a shockwave in the stillness. The song is not over. We are just getting to the good part. You chose humanity's chaotic, imperfect song over the void's perfect peace. You pulled back from the heart of the null. You returned to your symphony of worlds. But you did not just conduct it now. You became it. You poured your own consciousness, your own unmoored, fractured soul, into the weave. You became the thread that bound all the realities together. The null could not erase a story that was still being written. It could not silence a song that was constantly changing its tune. Your choice did not destroy the null. It created something the null could not touch. A new kind of existence. A multiverse built on the foundation of a choice. The choice to keep singing. You are no longer the woman who walked between universes. You are the woman who weaves them. You are not a person anymore. You are a presence, a living constant in the endless, swirling chaos of reality. You are the symphony. You are the shield. From your place in the weave, you can feel your old Earth. It is safe. Its stars are bright in the sky. Its people live their loud, messy, beautiful lives. They do not know your name. They do not know the price you paid. They only know that one day the stars stopped vanishing They only know that they were given a future. Sometimes, a child will look up at the night sky. They will see a strange shimmer between the constellations, a flicker of impossible geometry, a hint of a door, and they will feel a sudden, inexplicable sense of hope, a feeling of a guardian watching over them. They are feeling you, the woman who became a universe to save a world. The song that never ends.